There we go.
There we go. I can hear
Ryan?
you now.
Okay, great. Robert Estrada,
Yeah.
you have quorum.
How about me?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Don Daniels.
Here. No problem. Thank you. Before us, we have February 15th, 2023 minutes. Looking for a motion.
Motion to accept the minutes as written.
Mr. Wagaman made a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Pearson has a second. Any discussion, changes? Nothing at this time. So all those in favor by saying aye. Opposed, abstentions, hearing none, all those minutes passed. Excuse me, Mr. Estrada.
That wasn't here.
Okay, Mr. Estrada abstained. All right, motion passes as written. Any changes to our agenda?
No, Mr. Chair.
We have anybody in online for public comment tonight?
Doesn't look like it.
No one at public comment, so I can open it and close it. Okay. No public hearing, no unfinished business. Number 8, new business, 2024 comprehensive plan periodic review process.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and
Uh-oh.
I think my magic just ran.
Magic.
We're not live anymore, so.
We are live, but I had thought that I had.
Oh, the presentation.
Forgive me.
No, that's all right. Looking through this.
I think if there's something you guys can discuss while I'm doing this.
Okay.
Could you call a 5-minute recess and I'll be right back?
Yes, we'll have a 5-minute recess and
What do you think? That guy killed his wife and son
Oh,
at trial? I haven't watched it.
no, it's pretty crazy.
Used to be down that country. I spent 2 tours in Beaufort. Got some great places down there.
So I heard it's.
I'm gonna try. Sorry. Oh, we'll watch it small if that's all right. Mr.
That's
Chair.
all
We'll get
right.
Going, okay.
All right, we'll call the meeting back to order.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone's patience. So this evening, we're going to pick up on one more round before we step off to a couple of other topics for the next few meetings regarding the 2024 Comprehensive Plan Periodic Review process. And if you remember, all the way back in September, the very first thing we started with was housing. And we had a draft of the housing needs assessment for Lakewood in front of you at that point. We now have an updated version to that. So I wanted to share some of that with you this evening. And then also there's a requirement now for all cities to take a look at all of the elements across the board and look for racially disparate impacts, which is not the easiest to say term, but if you think about it, it's basically are people treated differently for a racial and ethnic reason, and then making sure that there is equity addressed in all of the elements. So as you all know, Lakewood is a young city, 1996 incorporation. So there's a lot of things that the city is trying to pick up after 100 years plus of Western development, right, in this area. And as a city start to make its own decisions. So much of what we'll be talking about all predates incorporation, but there's some things that the city needs to be doing now in 24 and going forward to help start to move a little bit of what's happened historically. So one of the things that the 24 process requires is that we look at both the existing needs. So for people that live in Lakewood right now, what is the housing capacity? Is there enough units on the ground for people who live here now? But then also looking at the projected needs. So we've talked about the 2044 growth targets, but we're also talking about now under this new 24 review, it has to be separated by income band. So once upon a time, and up until this time, it was how many total units City of Lakewood do you need to plan for? Now it's how many 0 to 30 AMI, 30 to 50, 50 to 80, etc. So it's a much more detailed analysis, and we're all jumping into this for the first time. So it's still a moving target a bit, but we do have some more detail for you this evening.
Clarification.
Yeah.
When you say a unit, it's talking about a structure. Do an apartment complex or a house.
A unit can be an apartment or a house. So a unit is what people are dwelling in. Yeah. Yeah. And just, I should clarify too, before I forget, in Lakewood, multifamily at this point includes anything 4 units or more. So that could be a high-rise apartment, that could be a 4-plex, that could be a great house that has 4 or more units inside, but looks like single family. Other places, they will separate out duplex, triplex, whatever's, and then have multifamily mean a specific thing like mid-rise or high-rise apartments. Lakewood includes more things into that term. So just to keep that in the back of your mind. All right. So this comes from the review. If you remember, again, there was a lot of graphics last time that was showing you the population makeup and their incomes in the city of Lakewood. But to summarize, Lakewood has not grown very fast since incorporation. It has a quote disproportionate number of younger adults, and that's first and foremost because of the base. You have a lot of service members and family members coming in and out pretty regularly in the city. It's becoming more diverse here in Lakewood. The last count was that Lakewood is now 48% white and 52% other people of color. And I think there's 15 cities like that in Washington state. So Lakewood's one of them. Veterans are also a key part of the population, no surprise. The most common type of household are small families, so single or 2 parents, 1 or 2 kids. Rent increases have been lower and slower than they were countywide, but they have gone up. And when you compare rent to what people make in Lakewood, it's still causing a lot of stress and getting worse. Homeowners do in fact make more, generally speaking, than the renters. Sometimes you will think duh, but not always. Sometimes you've got not so much that where people own their house, but if they were to try to buy it today, they wouldn't be able to afford it. But here in Lakewood, it continues to be, for generally speaking, people who own their home do also make more. African-American population is got a higher percentage of lower income. And we have seen an increase in homelessness here in Lakewood.
Yes, Mr. Estrada.
What surprised me in reading the documents was, as you pointed out there, this disproportionate number of younger adults. Is that new? Because I remember a while back we were saying the majority of our population was seniors. And we went one step further and we said something to the effect that, and that's why some bonds are not being passed, because the older generation doesn't want to pass bonds for schools. And I remember, y'all remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a while back. So now we're saying that the majority is young kids.
What I can tell you is in the last 10 years or so, JBLM's forces beefed up.
Yeah.
So there you had a significant increase, and it's gone down a little bit, but I think at its high point, it was at about 55,000 service members, up from 20 something.
Mhm.
And right now it's at about 40,000. So I think the increase in the number of people stationed at the base is partly what you're seeing.
Thank you.
So when we start to talk about capacity in housing, there's a couple of things to clarify, and I'm going to keep repeating myself here and at the council for the next year about this. The buildable lands report is the one from state law that says, okay, city, every 10 years, you got to tell us, are you planning for so many units and are they coming to fruition? Are they actually being built? And do you have the area set out in your city to take those properties or to take that growth? The answer for Lakewood is yes. We do have the quote capacity, but it's on relatively few vacant parcels. It's on what are called underutilized parcels, meaning it's a lower density than a zone allows, or there's a higher and better economic use for the property. And you'll see it's about 1,400 on the vacant, but almost 9,000 on underutilized property in the city. And so 78% is the conclusion of Lakewood's growth, at least through 2044, is now we're going to be talking infill and redevelopment. So whether it's ADUs, whether it is just authorizing more units per parcel, something else, rezoning altogether, that is where Lakewood is going to be pressured to plan for growth. And
Yes, Mr. Estrada.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So along that line, we're talking about codes, what do you call it? The
municipal code,
Yeah.
building code.
building codes. So we're not looking at property like in New Galilee Lake area, where we have many acres with one house. We're not saying that that should be looked at for redevelopment, are we?
Yeah, it could be.
It's a decision tree.
Yeah.
Right now, without changing any zoning, what this is telling you is that 78% of future growth needs to go into the multifamily areas. If the city council, whether the state legislature forces it or whether they decide on their own to do it, to say the R1 zone around Gravely Lake, American Lake, for instance, the R2 zone, you have to allow more than just the single family detached, and you have to allow more than one unit per parcel. Then this game changes.
Yeah.
The decisions change, and you would, in theory, over time, have redevelopment happen in those areas as well. But that is one of the big questions for Lakewood.
So, Mr. Estrada, just if you can remember back, we've had some rezone requests in the past. Example, one side of Interlochen is in the R2s. The other side is R1, going down Interlochen between 104th and Washington Boulevard, okay? So that strip, we've had some second generation, third generations acquiring those properties, large properties with a single family house. They wanted to subdivide it. They wanted to, so that's what we're kind of talking about, the infill of
Mhm.
changing zoning possibility by the state or the city council.
Yeah.
Having a look at those instead of in the past, nope, we'll leave them the same.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what the example.
Okay.
So this says somewhat of the same information, but across the left column or down the left column, you'll see all the different zones. R1, R2, R3, R4 are toward the bottom. MF1, MF2, and MF3 are the multifamily zones. MR1 and 2 are mixed residential. What you'll see is that vacant units are extremely low.
Yeah.
And again, it's the underutilized, meaning you could put more than what's on that parcel right now. And also if there are vacant properties, the underutilized though is by far the highest share. So whether that means a house that's on a lot right now stays there and something gets put on as an ADU attached or detached, or tear down, rebuild, that's where Lakewood's growth is focused right now. And actually, the two sub areas, so the downtown sub area and the Lakewood Station sub area. For downtown, at least, the assumption is it will be new construction and it will be mid and high rise. That's the way to do it. Lakewood Station District, there's a little bit more standing residential inventory. And so the decision will be made over time by the developers and property owners. How do they want to handle that? Do they want to try to keep what's there now and add, or do they want to just redevelop altogether?
Mhm.
Displacement. Yes, yes, absolutely. The other thing about our inventory is that we have about 27,000 units right now, according to the State Office of Financial Management. But in order to meet all of these goals that have been adopted recently, the rate of growth for construction for units, not necessarily single family detached, but any type of housing unit, needs to increase quite a bit in order to meet the target. So is it going to happen as infill or redevelopment? Is it going to be on multifamily zone or not? And how fast is it going to happen? Those are three key questions in Lakewood now. And like you say, Mr. Estrada, displacement is absolutely an issue here in Lakewood as this moves forward. So for the income band, starting to look at that, you have in Lakewood, what they're terming down renting and up renting going on. Down renting means Tiffany makes $50,000 a year, so a third of that is whatever that would be I can afford for my rent. But I'm going to find a place that's less than that. So I'm going to pay $800 a month on my rent, which means I'm doing great. I've got whatever extra money, right? But the person who that is the max that they could pay is then left out, right? They don't have a unit to go to because we don't have enough units. So what I have done is down rented, and that person then is left between a rock and a hard place. There's up renting as well, where Tiffany making 50,000, I'm going to try to go find a place where I pay 1,000 a month for rent, and I'm paying so much toward my house or my rental that I don't have enough for food, car, everything else. So both of those pieces of the equation are off right now. But in order to kind of bring that into a little more balance, what the finding here is that there needs to be, yes, the multifamily development, because there's only so much acreage available, but it needs to be for higher income people as well as low income people. Maybe it's somebody who wants to downsize and move into a townhome. Maybe it's somebody who wants an apartment because they don't like the yard or whatever. They want to have more choices than what we have right now in the city. They want the higher level stuff. The other thing, and this may not be politically correct, so forgive me, but it's the fact. You have policies in the Lakewood Comp Plan right now that say things like at least a quarter of the housing, or a max of a quarter of housing should be people at 80% of median income or less. What this new finding and research is showing is that almost a third of what's happening between now and 2044 has to be for those at 30% or less. So that's almost an opposite position. So there are policies in the Lakewood Comp Plan in order to comply in this 2024 review that are going to need to be eliminated or really edited because they really point the wrong direction in terms of housing for everybody.
And excuse me,
Yeah.
Stephanie, so surrounding cities, I've been noticing this is, I mean, to everybody and they're, saying, hey, okay, we're gonna have to change some of these R1s to
Yeah.
multifamily to allow a single, double, quad, up to 4 units to have available on these properties. And so it's everybody's gonna have to be doing this to get more infill, more of that ratio, lower income, higher
Mhm.
income. So it's a big deal around. And of course, everyone says, not in my yard or my neighborhood,
Yeah.
that's the comment that we hear all the time. But some tough decisions are gonna have to be made to these properties.
Yep. If you've seen anything in the news from Tacoma lately, I think they call it Home in Tacoma. I think that's the name of it. They are rezoning everything in the city right now, all of their residential properties to allow for more growth. Some of that is politically driven by their city council, but a lot of it is also state law change that now Lakewood is having to react to as well. If you remember talking about that umbrella of state law, policy, and then we finally get down to the Lakewood's comp plan and regulations. All of them now are saying so much growth is happening, particularly in the Puget Sound, for whatever reason, we're expecting it, it's been here. So we're gonna assume this much is coming in this amount of time. And we're gonna say jurisdictions in the Puget Sound, you guys really need to be ready for most of the growth that's coming to the state. That came down to the county level, and then it went into the growth target now that Lakewood has. So again, it's the same thing. It's saying there's so many people coming, you got to plan for it, and there's only so much land, and you can only use it so many different ways. So how are you going to be able to absorb these people?
And I've seen on some of the streets where they've taken just a small lot and they made a fourplex. And what happens is they have this side of the bottom, so it's in 2 stories. So one side of the bottom story is 1 unit, the other side is the second unit. The second floor is the same exact way, so they have a fourplex on a small lot
Mhm.
next to a house that's 60 years old, and they got this new construction butted
Yep.
up next to them. So that's how they're trying to accomplish some of these.
Yeah. And when you talk about infill, I should have had some more graphics here tonight, and I'll do it in the future, but if you can envision a part of Lakewood where it's all single family detached. Infill doesn't necessarily mean we're building a bunch more single family detached.
Yeah.
It's saying, like you
Yeah.
said, Mr. Chair, you got a single family detached house on this lot. On this lot, maybe there's a duplex. On the next, it's a fourplex. Then you come back to a single family detached. It is requiring, allowing, whatever word you want to use, different varieties within areas that have been single family detached. So that, again, coming back to what Lakewood needs to think about. What they're gonna
Yes,
do.
Mr. Otto.
And if you recall, a few years back, we were looking at the other side of the coin. We were having many of our seniors leaving the city because they couldn't find appropriate housing
Yeah.
for them now. So we were looking at cottages, if
Mhm.
you recall.
Yeah.
back in those days.
Mhm.
Yeah. Which-
We do have a cottage ordinance. It hasn't had a lot of bites.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
Do we have, like a pretty robust infill code right now, or is this what is gonna be really?
We'll get there in just a minute.
Okay.
You'll see what's going on. Yeah. We do allow, the city allows duplexes, triplexes, townhomes, and 4+ units in certain zones, but not all of them that state law now says they should. So that's one of the things that we're going to be tackling here at the Planning Commission. Okay, so I mentioned that policy in the comp plan that says 25% is the max of the housing that should go toward 80% or below. It's 56% is what's needed according to these latest calculations. So the comp plan policy is half or less than what the law is now saying the city has to plan for. The other thing that you'll see here is now emergency housing is a piece of the pie. That's never been a requirement, and Lakewood, because of the way it incorporated and how it partners with so many different agencies, really has had a referral process for emergency housing since it incorporated. So Tacoma Rescue Mission, LASA, Greater Lakes, any number of other ones that are out there. has been kind of the way that emergency housing has been dealt with. Now it's something that you have to plan for within the city. And according to this, over 500 units. So where's that going to go? And yeah.
Someone's neighborhood.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so here we get into some of what you were asking, Mr. Anderson, Pearson, sorry. R1 through R4, MF 1, 2, 3, MR1, MR2. If you were to add all of that acreage together, it's about half of the city's acres. But as you see, the third line across, that bolded 23.2, a quarter of the city is zoned R3, citywide, not just the residential part, but citywide. A quarter of it is zoned R3. So taking a look at what's allowed in R3, what's allowed in R4, you could actually get to significant more units that wouldn't necessarily need to be traditional multifamily apartment. And it might allow for some more variety in the type of housing. So again, the seniors who want to move down or whatever the choice is, allowing that in addition to just having what is currently in the code. Yeah.
Mm.
So this is what I mean. Again, zones are down the left. These are the types of uses across the right. So right now is what you see with the P's and the C's as permitted or conditional use. Single family detached is all that's allowed in R1 and R2. They do allow ADUs, but nothing higher than a single family detached. Once you get to R3 and R4, you have conditional uses, meaning you have to get special permission from the city for a duplex. In R4, those are allowed, but triplexes and beyond are not. So this, where the yellow is really where we're going to be talking a lot for 2024. Figuring out which, if any, or all of these zones, some or all of these are going to be allowed.
Mm.
And what that would do. And then the other piece to it, as we were talking about, is so much of the city is zoned R3.
Yeah.
Does it make sense to add some more MF or not? And the answer may be no, but it's just something that the city
Yeah.
needs to talk about.
Yes, Mr. Struck.
We didn't have a slide in our package.
You didn't because I got this today. Absolutely. I'm going to send this out to you. Yes.
Thank you.
So just as a summary, though, that R3, since it's 23%, that seems to be the easiest, one of the easiest
Mhm,
Biggest bang for your buck.
and probably the least resistance
mhm.
from the R1s and R2 citizens.
Yeah.
That would be seems like just as his first review.
Mhm. And just another wrinkle to this whole thing is around the lakes, it's not just the established rich, large lot homes that are there. It's the fact that it's a lake. It's the fact that it's got environmental constraints, the high water table, the fact that the roads and the sewer lines and the water lines are all established. And if you start to really densify, does all of that infrastructure need to change?
Yeah.
And who's going to bear that cost?
Yeah.
Because right now, what you hear at the state level is you will build this many units, but it doesn't talk about
Yeah.
all the other stuff that has to happen too. So this is complicated. It's not just change one thing and then it's fixed. It's understanding all of the pieces to it.
And as we heard the last meeting about water rights, having
Mhm.
enough, because we don't own all of our utilities, so
Yep.
we're relying on, water, electricity, all of those services like you're mentioning.
Yeah. And then the other issue that I know our city council is concerned about is today was the first day that the new tree code went into effect.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
Where,
today.
yeah, where now you have new rules.
Yeah.
You have new rules on tree maintenance, tree preservation. So now we're getting into some competing policies. Is it climate change? Is it tree preservation? Is it adding more structures to a parcel? How does all this jive with each other? And that's another thing that has yet to be resolved.
So just another, sorry to keep interrupting,
You're
but
fine.
I found out that as reviewing some of this, some of the decisions that the council had to make is that exact same comment that you just made about how does this all fit in? How's the tree code going to fit in? And one significant one that I thought just off the top I was shocked that they went from 17,000 square feet, remember? And
Mhm.
below you didn't have to do any of this. They lowered it from 17,000 to 10.
Mhm.
Some of the reasons is, which I really didn't know why or the reasoning, but some of it was because of this. If it's 10, the restriction between 17 and 10, then these multifamilies, it just, they had to worry about the Gary White Oak. They had to
Mhm.
worry about the amount of tree canopy. So there was a reasoning other than just, let's just lower it down.
Yeah,
So,
We recommended 17, they went down to 10.
yeah,
So that's where you get that, we should get that feedback again.
I hear you. I know, but I just, that's one of the things that I didn't realize but
Yeah.
it does fit in now with some of these
Yeah.
other policies
Yeah.
and things.
That's helpful to hear. Is there, Tiffany, you mentioned a little bit about the lakes and, it's not just that they're rich homes, but there's setbacks and things. Is there other environmental areas that are like that are currently where we can't build or items in there in certain zones that make a zone not as attractive to change?
well, you're gonna have the shoreline regulations, not only around the lakes, but along many other coastal spots and creeks. And then
Mhm.
you're also gonna have floodplain. And so if you remember a few years ago,
Yeah.
the change down in Springbrook from residential to industrial,
Mhm.
that was in part because there was a threat of flood risk. And the thought process is if you're gonna develop a flood prone parcel, if it's industrial development, less property damage, less people damage
Mhm.
than if you were to have a bunch of people living on that property. So that's why the decision there.
Mr. Pearson.
I don't know if you're gonna touch on this later. So like the portion of housing, that's going to be apartment and multifamily versus like home ownership of a single, fee simple, I'm working on a townhouse project in Pierce County, and it's like 1.5 acres, maybe 2 acres, and we're putting 35 townhouses on, and those are all fee simple lots where, we're not requiring like lots of, historically in previous codes, it would require like a public road on site to, and it just wouldn't happen. And so there's also limits as to these are trying to be like affordable houses, so they're capped at 1,400 square feet. So there's a lot of it's a really like tasteful way, I think, to do like higher density rather than just apartment complexes and allowing people, or condos. I don't know how what the complexities are. I wish that the guy
Paul?
Philip
Yeah,
Combs?
Phil Combs is here because he's kind of pretty knowledgeable on that stuff. But like how the home ownership goes with, is it easier to get a loan for, just a townhouse that's fee simple on a lot versus, being part of a condo complex and that
Yeah.
stuff. So,
Yeah. From what I understand, and I'm not a date, but when I was working with the Builders Association, condo liability was a big issue and townhomes was different.
yeah.
And from what I understand, while some changes were made at the state level about that, it's not all the way to the point where developers are real comfortable doing condos yet. But related to townhomes and condos and duplexes and triplexes, the other issue, all of this is going to have to take into account is parking. So if you think about, just got done with the town center, I'm sorry, the Lakewood Station District where we said yes to on-site parking, not to street parking, and you have to have so many parking spaces per unit you're building. That's all up in the air too, based on what the state legislature is doing. And so if you are a city of Lakewood that looks at historically behaviors of the service members who are coming in and out and living multiple guys to an apartment and they all have their own car, or you've got a multi-generational family in a place, and again, they have multiple cars, versus somebody coming in and saying for environmental reasons, for development interest reasons, whatever, we don't need that much parking there. Where do the people with the cars end up? And at this point, Lakewood doesn't want to have on-street parking. So what are we gonna do? That's another question, unfortunately. Yeah,
I do see, excuse me, I do see the report that they're gonna increase some more housing on North Fort, like substantial amount of homes or apartments or something. That
Yeah.
they're putting, I think, 350 units somewhere
Yeah.
out there.
yeah, they have got however many thousands of units on the base,
Yeah.
but they're recognizing that they need more on-base housing because that's what the entry-level people
Mhm.
need. And so they're, like you say, it's going to be some more on base. And then there's people that are now regularly talking to the base about the ability to get either recommendations for people coming into town, this is where you live off base as a development,
Mhm.
or they actually have a private lease between JBLM and that particular development to say, this is a preferred, safe
Yeah.
place for you guys to live.
Mhm.
So that's, the interest is now there. We'll see how well they do. All right. So with all of that as backup, there's two things, as you well know, going along. We have 2023's comp plan amendment process, which actually we'll start talking about in more detail next time. And we have the big 2024 one going on at the same time. So I tried to summarize here for you the top sentences talking about this year's comp plan changes. There's going to be a change to allow permanent supportive housing and transitional housing, and then emergency housing in zones where it's not allowed at all. And that is a state law change. The city has to do it. There's no question, but that's what's happening in 23.
Mhm.
That may have some questions for the public as is, but it has to happen. And then in 24, which is the bottom paragraph there, that's where all of these other bigger, more complicated discussions are going to happen. And just to give you a sense of timeline, by the end of June, we will have for you to look at, but not really hold substantive hearings on or anything yet, what is recommended for the duplex, the triplex, the townhomes, and what goes in the multifamily or not. And we're going to start with a big outreach to the public, give people a year to think about it, to talk about it. It won't be to the same scale probably as what Tacoma has been doing with their home in Tacoma thing, but we do intend to really try to get people to pay attention and give feedback. And I know the council is very concerned about this issue too.
Yes, Mr. Pearson.
Does Tacoma have R3 on 4 zoning?
I don't think that they use the same terms.
Yeah.
Do
They may have similar densities allowed in various uses, but they're called something different.
Do they have like 4 different residential zones, or is it like you have an R1 and an R2 with some density, but then after that, they just cut straight to like, multifamily stuff?
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I looked at it.
It's a crazy idea, but like, can we just get rid of R3 and R4 and just kind of start hammering that with like, things that make sense? I mean,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
kind of
Something to talk about for sure. In the middle there, this is going to actually affect one of the recommendations that you made to council about the 23 amendments.
Mhm.
And this is an error on my part, so I apologize to you. If you remember the application that was to say at the southern boundary of the downtown sub area, it was, the guy wanted to do 3 parcels and you said, well, let's just increase
That whole-
the
that-
boundary.
Yeah.
If you were to do that, you would be creating a bunch of non-conforming uses
Oh.
because it's actually prohibited. Sorry, and I didn't
Oh.
catch that. So my apologies to you.
Oh, those
Um,
people.
The central business district does not allow single-family detached duplex, triplex. And so the council decided to just take those parcels back out.
Okay.
So it's just the parcels that you said
Yes.
that the person originally requested, and then the ones immediately to the south of that were already MF.
Oh,
So it would be increasing the density on the ones that were MF1 to make them MF3, but it took the single-family stuff out.
okay.
And that was an error on my part, so I do apologize. Okay. Racially disparate impacts and equity. I'll just be perfectly blunt.
Yeah.
Lakewood is minority white. It has a history of poverty and I won't call it segregated housing, but separated housing based on economy for just as a fact, meaning the wealthier parts of the city are the whiter parts of the city and the poorer parts are more people of color. As I mentioned at the start of this predates incorporation, where you see, actually, we're going to talk about a little bit from now, some racial covenants on deeds that say things like the only person of color can be your chauffeur kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And then other than that, though, it's been this separation of economy. The Lake District, I'll call it that, stays as is, and we're going to do everything else over on the east side of the city, right? So taking a look at that now in the 2024 process, there's a requirement of the city to show where are these impacts being felt, and I don't think it'll be a surprise to anyone. And then what can the city start to do at the very least in terms of its policies? Again, this is a lot of what I just said, but the largest area for risk of displacement is the eastern and southern edges of Lakewood, in particular in the Lakewood Station District, that sub area, and then Lakeview Kendrick. So this is the eastern and southern part. This is Lakeview. This is the Lakewood Station District sub area plan. So no, again, no surprise, but this is the displacement map that the Puget Sound Regional Council put together. It's based on socio-demographic, transportation options, neighborhood characteristics, housing characteristics, and civic engagement. And so you'll see that the higher is in Lakeview and Springbrook, no surprise, up here in Monte Vista, and then a little bit higher just to the northern boundary of the city over there. This is the moderate risk, but in part that's because there's less residential development there. So. This is showing you social vulnerability. And again, we're getting into some quarter word. What is it? A quarter word? Can't remember what it was. Anyway, the more expensive words are longer syllables, I guess. Anyway, again, very similar map in terms of coloring. You'll see Lakeview again, kind of that hook shape, and then Springbrook underneath it, and then up to the east, over to the top there is Monte Vista, and then Springbrook and Tillicum again are also risk. And this is talking about poverty rates, unemployment, people without a high school diploma, single parent household, minority status, they don't speak English, the number of mobile unit structures, crowding of households with no car. So again, you'll see it's the east side of the city, southern part of the city, that there is the social vulnerability and highest risk of displacement. And that's where the higher density stuff is planned for right now. This is just a county-wide, and I'm not going to go into great detail here, but if you get a chance to look at this, what it's telling you is the blue bar, the blue one, really doesn't change that much over time. And it's showing you that in 1960, 32% of the county's homes were owned by Black individuals. In 2018, almost whatever that is, it's 34%. As opposed to, let's see, Indigenous owned went from 46 to 61, Latino owned went from 29 to 48, Asian went from 52 to 62, but Black owned really didn't change. And so proportionately speaking, again, that population is having the hardest time.
Neither did white.
Yeah. They're 69 and 68, so pretty much hanging in there. These are the areas in Lakewood that, again, pre-incorporation, long time ago, for the most part, this is from the 30s and 40s, where there are those specific covenants that say the only people that can live here are white, and anybody that else is here is a servant or a chauffeur. And I mean, literally, that's what it says. So I don't know if any or all of the deeds, because this comes from 2021, and there is a state process now to get that removed from your deed. You can go to the county auditor or assessor and they will remove it. But this is what they found just within the last couple of years. It's still on the books. And so the city can't go out and proactively make that change, but they can certainly encourage people to do that. I know I live in a house that has a deed that says no Asians. People ignore it obviously now, but the fact is it should be gone.
Yeah.
And this is just something that Lakewood needs to take into account from before it became a city.
Is there any fee to make that change? Is there anything stopping people from doing it? Something obviously I didn't know about and would want to change, but is there anything from the public that they'd want to know or would stop people from doing this?
I'm not aware of a fee, and I'm actually providing information on March 13th to the city about some of this. And there is a process that you follow where it's relatively simple with the county to get it removed. And I will double check that to see if there's any money required, Mr. Parsons.
Thank you.
And as you see down on the bottom right here, it's 928 lots out of Lakewood's whatever we have. So that's not an insignificant amount of the housing within the city.
What does it mean by racially restricted? What have we done? We have a policy that says you can't.
Well, there's city comp plan policies that says certain things, but this is talking about specifically on people's deeds. when you bought that
The
property or,
title of the house.
yeah, it says nobody but white people can live here. And that's on all of those lots in the city.
Wow.
And
I
that's,
mean, is that I mean, I guess it's a little surprising to me, but so we've gone and checked the deeds to see that somebody's gone through and read those things.
Mhm. Yeah, it was a project that University of Washington and Eastern Washington University did together. So they've done this throughout the state now. And this is just the information specific to Lakewood.
And those deeds hold up, that's law.
It's on the deed. It's not enforced anymore. What I'm pointing out to you is that as we start to get through this 2024 process, this is something the city's been asked to look at and try to start to encourage it go away and make sure its own policies discourage this kind of thing. So you can go, it's University of Washington where you can see actually more about that map. One thing I found interesting though is in 1970, 1/3 of the county's Black population were at Fort Lewis. Again, not a surprise,
Yeah.
right? Most of them lived in Hilltop. They didn't live in Lakewood. And then a quarter of the Asian and Latino people in the county were also stationed at the base. But again, if you look at the way Lakewood has developed, not only from 1970 forward, but further back, those folks have never had a leg up in Lakewood's housing. So where do we sit? Again, you're going to have some stuff come in front of you regarding housing in the 2023 process. That's just that permanent supportive and transitional housing has to happen. State law is going to go through. This is all 2024. As you can imagine, there's going to be, I think, resistance to this. There's going to be questions about it. There's going to be business concerns as well as residential concerns, I think, as well. And we're going to work hard as a city to try to reach out to those areas on the east and the south part of the city that traditionally haven't really engaged very much. Try to figure out how we can get their feedback incorporated into this as well. And then, as you just experienced with the climate change, or I'm sorry, the tree code, you may come up with a recommendation to the city council, but then they go through that process. And it may not look like what you guys did for whatever reason.
Right,
They'll make a different decision. So by end of June, the housing element and then the climate change stuff will be in front of you as well.
Okay.
And then we'll take a little break and come back after we get through the 2023 process to talk about the other parts of the comprehensive plan to get through for the end of the year. So any questions on housing and equity and?
Nope.
So
Good, Mr. Estrada.
When we start working on this, I think the pushback won't be to us at the city, not maybe it's the city. But I think mostly in Olympia.
Mhm.
Because that's where it's all coming down from.
Mhm.
So we will attempt to adhere to, but at the same time, to be pushed back.
Mr.
Yeah.
Wagner.
said I'm up. Yeah, I mean, to me, anybody that wants to live anywhere they want, that should happen. You know,
Mhm.
they're out, you know, and so where's the fight gonna be? What do you think?
I'm hoping that there's not a fight about the deed stuff. I'm hoping that is,
Easily
Yeah, that's
resolved.
also good.
it's just raising awareness and telling people about it.
It seems like a no-brainer. It's just
It does to me.
The reason I brought that up to you here is just to show that some of the reason you see the patterns of where people live in Lakewood today is as a result of that. If you were an Asian person or a Black person trying to find a house while those deeds were enforced, you simply couldn't live in that part of the city.
Who enforced those?
The property owners.
The property owners?
Yeah. And if you were in a homeowners association, that's part of, would be
You know,
enforcement body.
there's, I mean, homeowners associations and stuff, there's different that could or could not be challenged, but
Yeah, you end up with, between the 40s when a lot of these developments and those kinds of things were put in place, 1 or 2 or 3 generations later, now you still see the ripple of that happening. Yeah.
It's like a homeowners association says you can't have your truck parked out.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
one of those stipulations.
Yeah.
So this is, I'm trying to bring things to you
Yeah.
piece by piece because it is
Oh.
so convoluted with this 24 process. And as we start in on some of the other topics, this will kind of fade to the back of your mind and I'll try to remind you and, as we go through it, you're going to actually start having hearings on this stuff probably next May.
Okay.
So it's going to be like May, not of 23, but May of 24.
Yeah.
So we're going to have a lot to do between now and then.
So what is how does the process work if these proposed plans from the state? Is it at a certain time of the year that typically they will, say, okay, we'll make a decision and then they come and
Mhm.
we have to, is there a timing?
Yeah, yeah. The legislature goes on a 2-year cycle where there's a long session and then they call it the short session and then a long session and then a short. The long session, which is what we're in right now, is they talk about not only policy, but they set the state's budget, which is why it's a longer session. And then the shorter one, in theory, it's basically, yes, everything we did last time was good. We'll let it hold. But lately, there's been a lot of activity during that short session as well. Regardless, whether you're in a short or a long session, generally speaking, whatever decisions they make go into effect July 1st of that year. So for instance, right now, they are talking about more housing bills. If they actually pass, July 1 of this year, the bill will go into effect and it would say, you have to do X, Y, Z within 1 year, within 5 years, but it's that July 1 date, that's the start.
All right.
There may be, in addition to everything I just went through, more rules coming out from the legislature this year that the city will want to take a look at for the 24 process. We just don't know yet.
So is this 24, this is when the infill code would be kind of revamped, would be at some point next year?
So we have to get through the 23 stuff, which is at this point looking pretty simple comparatively.
Yeah.
And then we'll get back into the 24.
Okay. Mr. Parsons, do you have any other questions?
No, I think that answers it. I mean, that makes sense from my perspective.
All right, good. All right, is that it?
That's
I
it,
just had
Mr.
Oh,
one
go
more.
ahead.
So this infill lot project, so this is the first one in Pierce County. And it's really a pretty nice product and you're getting units that are in the at the $300,000 threshold, in this market. It's pretty nice.
Mhm.
And they're capped on square footage. It's really skinny, 3-story, but you get to own a house and you get to have a garage and
Yeah.
it's
And-
pretty nice. And they don't have, it's narrow, there's there's not much else to it. And emergency vehicle access down the middle with the hammerhead at the end, shared trash receptacle at the end. And just boom, 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 boom,
Yeah.
basically fourplexes, the whole
Yeah.
way down this thing. So
Yeah. And that's the thing too. I've been talking policy, and then zoning, but what has to happen at the same time is the regulations on all of that need to change as well.
yeah,
So Lakewood could say 6 units per acre,
Yeah,
but if they don't change what's required on site or what the
Yeah,
setbacks
never
are
did
yeah.
in order to make that physically possible, so what if you change your zoning? So it's both pieces
Yeah.
have to move through the
So what
process.
part of Pierce County?
so it's out in South Hill. So this is the first
Okay.
one. But that's the same thing, is that the Pierce County road standards
Yeah,
didn't account for this. And so now it's deviation after deviation to get
Yep.
this thing approved.
Yep.
And when it's it's a great product, makes sense, meets all the planning codes, meets the intent of all the plans and everything.
How
Yeah.
far out in South Hill? I mean, the way out, do you
No,
think? Oh,
no,
just,
maybe 150th or something.
okay, yeah. No,
Um,
by the airport.
yeah. But
Okay,
it's- Yeah.
So-
go ahead, Mr. Wakeman.
So what are the things that prevent somebody from, first off, cost?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
come to cost. So not every person is going to be able to afford the house that they want.
Even at
Is
300,000.
that a fact?
Oh,
And
yeah.
so could that, certainly some people say, well, that's discriminatory. So now we take into your ability to earn revenue. So, and we talk about affordable housing. How do we do this?
Mhm.
That makes sense and
Sure.
that we're not saying, well, I mean, but some people can make more money than others.
Mhm.
You know, Phil Coombs has said he thinks that we can mix the socioeconomic status.
Mhm.
He thinks that works. And
But
there's
the lake-
models.
At the Lakewood Station, that's
Yeah.
kind of the thought in the Lakewood
Well,
Station.
no, I hear you, you
But
know,
what's affordable housing or what's the lower end spectrum, you know,
Yeah.
how many people does that market is gonna attract?
Sure. And it's
So-
important to remember too, new construction isn't going to necessarily be affordable.
Yeah.
Unless it's specifically limited by rule,
Yeah.
right? You could be building new multifamily, new duplex, triplex,
Mhm.
whatever. And it's the market rate stuff because what's happening now is people who might want that product have nowhere to go.
Yeah.
And so they're staying in their stuff that maybe somebody who makes less money would otherwise be able to afford. So someone, this is an extreme, somebody lives in Lakeview, they're stuck there because they can't find a condo to move to. They could afford something that maybe was 80% of AMI, but they're in that house. And so somebody who could afford that is stuck wherever they are.
Yeah.
So it's like a Tetris game almost where
Yeah.
the more types of housing that gets built, whether it's made affordable from day one or not, gives everybody more choice. People can start to move around. The market starts to take care of, once you do get into whether it's a condo at first or not, you can start to build equity and then you're on your way. That's the idea.
Okay, hearing no other updates then from the,
Nope, the next meeting will be April 5th and we'll be back in the usual room.
not March 15th?
I'm sorry, March 15th.
Okay,
Forgive
good.
me.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, March 15th over there and we'll start in with the 2023 comp plan package.
Good. And so I will try to call in. I'll be down
Okay.
in Mexico. So,
fishing,
no, just relaxing.
relax.
Anyone else going to be out that they know of for?
March
next
15th.
meeting?
So if you,
I'm going to be calling in again. I'm still going to be down in California then.
okay, no problem. Well, good.
No snow and.
Yeah, snow and stuff. So,
In LA, yeah,
and then March 27th
yes, thank
is
you.
a joint meeting. Brian, I might need you as well on that. I'm not coming back till April 8th.
Oh, okay.
You get to do with the city council.
Yeah.
Is that 2 in a row?
Yeah, that's 2 in a row, man. I'm just breaking him in, making sure he's, good. Yeah, I come back on April 8th, I think. So,
Okay.
long time. All right, so no other reports, no other discussion. We'll call the meeting adjourned.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Everyone feels discriminatory to me that you get to do that.
I know, it's terrible.